Okay, once again, welcome back everyone to the book club and our last episode covering the last 10 chapters of Don Quixote, volume 1. Let's, as usual, start with recapping chapter by chapter, and as we go, we're gonna discuss some minor points I made, and probably you did too. Okay, we're starting with chapter 43, and as we remember from the previous chapters, we just were introduced with Clara and the judge, the brother of the Christian slave that was introduced even more chapters before. But in this chapter we get a new character who's named Senor Don Luis, just reminding you. And how are we exactly introduced with this character?
He starts singing while everyone was sleeping. And the girl that Clara, she says that she loves him, but she's 16, and other girls think that aren't you too young to know so many things about love?
And she's actually 15, and this point is made multiple times, and that's one of the first notes I made, because it's interesting how Dorothea reacted to her love story. Do you remember?
She was considering, like, while listening to her, she took her very seriously and also, like, was compassionate about what she was saying about love. So she wasn't judging her at all.
Maybe that's because Dorothea also don't know what.
I actually think she was judging her slightly, because it wasn't age appropriate yet.
So it was sarcastic of her to react that way.
There is an exact quote I highlighted. Dorothea was amazed at the urgent language of the girl, for it seemed to be far beyond such experience of life as her tender years gave any promise of. So she's at that point is too inexperienced to talk on love.
But to me it comes just as an amazement from the account, without
Maybe.
Yeah, I also find it like an empathy towards Clara.
Here I made a mental note that maybe it is condemned in the society, marriage at such a young age, but I think later we'll see that that's a false assumption.
How old is she?
She's 15, she's not even 16 yet, and the same goes for the Louis.
It's not young.
Yeah, for that age.
But Dorothea here seems to be critical about the marriage, or at least she's critical of the female side, speaking of love at such young age. So maybe for society it's okay to give her away, but not okay for her to realize that feeling seriously yet.
Maybe she's just jealous, envious of the other one's young youth,
I truly believe Dorothea is not like that.
No?
Dorothea
Okay.
seems like a...
Dorothea,
It has her own
the-
man.
But she don't like and love him.
I'm sorry, I'm confused with the name.
Dorothea is the one. Yeah,
Fernandez, new/old wife.
I saw that maybe Dorothea feels bad for that girl, Clara, because she herself was raped by the man that she was in love with, and maybe she thinks that she's too young and she will not understand what if he wants to do something bad with her.
Maybe it's done out of protection of the girl. And what do we have? Do you remember what happens later to Don Quixote himself, outside of Clara and Louis stories?
The man from whom Don Quixote stole the basin comes.
That's gonna happen in chapter 44. In chapter 43, just 4 travelers appeared. And before that, I think at the end of the previous episode, we made our predictions about what we expect to see in the last 10 chapters, because they're the concluding ones. We expect all the plot lines to finish somehow. And we just made a prediction about 4 travelers who will appear to be members of the Brotherhood. And with this, we move to chapter 44. Here I'm gonna quickly recap the part where the innkeeper's daughter make fun of the Don Quixote and ties his hands, capturing him outside. In chapter 44, we already skipped that part. Don Quixote is finally set free. He makes a big fuss out of it. And let's go back to four travelers and what do they want?
The travelers are the servants of Louis' father,
Mhm.
the guy who was singing.
Mhm.
They were sent by his father to
Mhm.
return him home.
And then there's dialogue between Louis and those guys, and Louis saying them that no,
And what's their
wanna
main
stay
point? Why
here.
do they want to get Louis back?
Because he's.
because his father miss.
Mhm.
And how did they
loves
find
him.
out that Louis is there?
His father.
His friend said.
She's not
Yeah,
father.
not
not
his
his
friend.
father.
Someone to whom Louis said about his story and that he has some plan to go here, and he told.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
it was mentioned before that Louis himself is highly educated for his age.
Mhm.
He goes to academia, and
Yeah.
one other students he goes there with after
Also, he
witnessing.
writes some poems. And
Yeah. And other student after witnessing how bad his father grieves, he
Mhm.
decided to tell the
Yeah.
truth. And after that, four travelers were sent.
Mhm.
Sorry, can I make a cut? Ты
Да.
записываешь?
Mhm.
Можешь погромче немножко перейти? А?
Вместе.
Погромче просто.
Окей, окей.
Тебе надо плохо слышать.
At the same time, we know that the judge appears, the father of Clara, and future father-in-law of Louis.
Mhm.
What's his reaction to this whole situation?
He says that for men that they don't have a reason to take Louis back because he knows what he wants to do because he's not a child anymore, and he tries
That's
to.
Louis himself, right?
Hmm?
Louis himself said it.
I think he tried to support him, that Clara's father.
I think the judge was generally unaware of Louis' love,
Hmm.
and he was just curious why would he appear here in such a costume.
Yes,
He was dressed as a military, just a little notion.
He didn't even recognize his neighbor, and then after those four men said, like, don't you see the resemblance to your neighbor's son? And he then only said, like, how is his name? Don Luis, what are you doing here?
Mhm. And generally, after Louis confesses his love for Clara to her father, what's his general reaction? And why?
Because he's rich. He's happy that Louis wants his daughter because he said like it would be a good party,
Mhm,
like
good match,
yes, and like his family is not that rich, and he said that I will be happy if my daughter will marry such a noble man. And as you said before, like we all thought that she's too young to be married, to be thinking about love, but her father is already ready to give her away.
Mm-hmm. And we're actually going to see the exact same situation later in the 51st chapter. We will discuss. And once again, it's a story with class difference.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we already seen many examples of it throughout the novel.
Although they play out differently, like each of them, no?
How differently?
Well, if we consider the situation with Dorothea and Fernando,
Uh-huh.
Dorothea faced like many challenges upon finally marrying the man of her dreams.
Which makes her, in a way, more realistic character
Yeah.
than Clara.
But Clara is like a classic passive character from the chivalry.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly the point I wanted to lead the discussion to.
Finally, we saw example.
At the same time, two other guests try to sneak out. Innkeeper catches them, and the fight starts. Daughter asks Don Quixote for help, and what does Don Quixote do about all
He
that?
says that he isn't supposed to fight with people who aren't considered to be knights.
Mm-hmm.
So he basically rejects their offer.
Yeah. And after that, there is a funny cut made by the narrator. He says, "But let us leave him there, for he will surely find someone to help him, and if not, let him suffer." And we go back to the Louis.
Yeah.
Louis, at that time, concluded his speech with a judge, and who appears?
Barbara.
Yes, 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 yes.
From whom
Mhm.
they stole helmet?
Yeah. Helmet.
Mhm.
Not helmet. Yeah.
And what happens with him and whom he catches first?
Sancho.
Mm-hmm. And he blames them both for stealing his horse equipment, mule equipment. And what's Don Quixote's and Sancho's reaction to that? To the in real world, a crime.
They say that Anna Sancho says. He
He
says
says-
that my lord, not lord, my knight, not king,
Повелитель.
повелитель.
My
To
lord,
Don Quixote.
my master.
My master beat you and he won, and that's why we took all your things.
He won in a fair fight.
Yeah,
Yeah,
fair
Sancho
fight.
is a simple man.
And also Sancho beat him in the teeth.
Himself, yeah.
Yes.
Did Quixote consider the barber a knight when he tried to steal his daisy?
No, I think he thought to himself that somehow the enchanted Mambrino's helmet, that enchanted, nobody else realizes that it's a helmet, got into a stranger's hands.
So he needs to get it because this person doesn't appreciate
Mhm.
it.
And once again, what starts as expected from the novel?
Fight.
A fight.
Again.
During the fight, all previously met characters appear in the yard. And how do they treat the situation?
They play along with Don Quixote's tales that it's not a basin, it's a helmet. I don't know, like maybe they're mocking him or they're just trying to see what happens there.
What do others think? What do others think?
I think that they understand that Don Quixote is wrong. They are just having fun and gaslighting that poor man.
There are many instances where other characters made fun of Sancho and Don Quixote intentionally, especially when Sancho was trying to deliver the letters to Dulcinea and he sold them from his memory. And I think that's the similar case with them, like genuinely enjoying the situation. Having fun.
I just the first chapters in the inn when he was trying to be adopted knight.
I just remember during the first two episodes, we talked a lot about their actually good intentions of trying to help Don Quixote. What do you think about that now?
I remember I proposed the topic that they are not virtuous enough to be like good people, but you disagreed with me.
Nah, I think I made a note that it makes them very realistic.
Yeah, still.
Yeah. And I made a mistake before. Other travelers, new group of travelers appears, and now it's officers of the Holy Brotherhood.
Yes.
And their goal is to
Capture Don Quixote
For releasing those.
prisoners.
Valley slaves.
No,
Mhm.
first they
originally he was just they just wanted to stay the night,
Yeah.
and then they
And then
saw
find
Don
out
Quixote,
that
Yeah.
here's Don Quixote.
checked their personal document, realized that they look alike, the description matches. One of the Louis servants steps in and calls out the pretense officer. Here, Louis and his servants did not want to play along, and they actually support the barber side. And what did officers of the Brotherhood do?
they tried to arrest him, but priest says like there is no point of arresting him because he will be released because he's mad. And in the court they will say like, he's mad, we can't capture
I
him.
think it actually took some persuasion for them to come to that conclusion, because priest had a whole monologue to them about Don Quixote being out of his mind and that it's not worth capturing him yet.
It was also all in the middle of the fight and some chaos in the inn because the two people didn't want to pay.
And the whole inn goes upside down again with a new fight. And mid-fight, Clara drops unconscious, I think, for the second time already. And like we made a comment before about her it's like she fits into this stereotype of a romantic character with her slightly not age-appropriate love and generally her entire attitude. It seems like this situation goes well into that argument. After that, there is another funny quote from the book, so that the whole inn was nothing but cries, shouts, shrieks, confusion, terrors, dismay, mishaps, sword cuts, fisticuffs, cuddlings, kicks, and bloodshed. And in the midst of all the chaos, complication, and general entanglement, Don Quixote took it into his head that he had been plunged into the thick of the discord of Agramante's camp. And then he gives a little speech. And somehow it helps resolve the entire conflict.
Isn't that when he's delusional again and considers depression like one of the chivalry books?
Yeah, exactly. And he draws a parallel with two kings trying to resolve their inner conflict. And somehow his approach helps.
Yeah.
And we said before that sometimes it's like his chivalry help the situation.
It's like the first instance where his perception actually helps to resolve the conflict.
We kind of had one previous case similar to this. It was with the Marcella. It was with Marcella, and we concluded that the only reason he did not play along with all the men who tried to condemn the woman was because he had his completely different perception of the world due to chivalry books.
But this time, didn't he again say like the inn is enchanted? So he made everyone else also delusional alone. He just has good rhetoric and is able to like talk very persuasively.
And I think he does that a lot because throughout the novel, lots and lots of characters make a comment about his bright mind, as long as he doesn't touch on the topic of chivalry. He sounds completely sane and persuasive to them.
Yeah, I was going to actually draw your attention to what you're saying, actually, right? So sometimes, quite often, Don Quixote manages to impose his delusions on others without their being delusional like he is. And yet, in terms of practical effects, he manages to convince or persuade them, right? And this is a good example, Marcel is another, and we can find many others. And thinking about his relationship to the books of chivalry world in which he is kind of traveling all the time, more or less, right? It's as if sometimes real people, and it's a multi-layered reality anyway, right? Kind of agree to play by his rules and become part of his game, part of his world, part of his imaginary reality, and become the characters in the novel that he's writing in his head, right? And when you were talking about Clara being so stereotypically romantic, or whatever you call it, right? Romance, not novels, right? But romantic. I wonder if you think that there is any connection. Does she behave that way because of Don Quixote, or is she that way? And if she is that way, isn't she like a character who is like him, kind of comes from a different reality? The main thing here is to kind of try and find where those layers are, where they begin and where they end, because they keep. The trick that Cervantes is playing is mixing things up all the time, right?
I think at this point we have to study the lines more closely because we're just reading it throughout the story. But when you pose such question, we need to study it closely, trying to determine whether it's.
I'm not proposing it. I'm just thinking based on what you're saying. It's not It's not that I am proposing anything, right? I think this is what you are saying. In a sense.
In my brain, it looks like a chart, or almost. There are realistic characters, real characters who are attached to the real world, just like Clara, but who still fall into this romantic stereotype. Then people who follow the delusions. Wait, what goes first after that? Real but believe the delusion but still attached to the real world, and truly delusioned. And here I think realistic characters and delusioned characters like Don Quixote, they can be swapped, and we will see that later. Like, it depends on the perspective from which you're reading.
But also, like, a lot of women characters written by Cervantes for this book are like that, like Clara. Like, the only exceptions are Marcela and also even like the Algerian woman. Like, we think of her as if she's like kind of different, but maybe it's just because she's a foreigner. She's portrayed that way. I don't know.
So they are like Emma already?
Woman.
Not really delusional,
No,
attached to the reality.
Emma has her own will, like she does some reckless things. But in Cervantes, these women are just passive.
Also,
Not
they
all
are.
of them are passive. Speaking of Dorothea and Lucinda.
Когда не ушла в восхищение.
Mhm.
I forgot her name, yeah. And also we have Marcella, who's also really active compared to other girls.
Yeah, they stood out.
It's strange that all good female characters are described as very, very beautiful, and we don't have not beautiful but good female characters like Clara, Lucinda, Dorothea, Marcella, all of them, like all beautiful girls of Spain in one place.
But also, they, like, most of them are considered fallen throughout the story. Like, those could not fit on the standard of the time.
No.
Like Marcella, like Lucinda.
Marcella?
Lucinda Dorothea. Lucinda is not full.
Marcella
Do you consider
is not
fallen?
fallen?
No, because of their attitude towards the action of the men that want to be with them. Or even, what do you think?
I have a simple and easy answer. I guess the more realistic. So, what was the initial question?
I can't remember.
Okay, so I got an idea. You were discussing how the characters.
Yeah, I remember the original question.
Female characters are portrayed as passive by Cervantes. Most female characters.
It was asked whether Clara is just as delusioned as Don Quixote, and why is she similarly delusioned, because of Don Quixote or just because of the way she is herself.
So my simple answer is just because Cervantes decided like that. It's his story, it's his narrative. He writes as he wants, and of course we can delve into the story. This think that everything is real and look at this perspective, but looking at realistic perspective is just author's view on that. At that time,
Yeah, and he makes fun of Don Quixote just like those characters you mentioned who seem to make fun of Don Quixote.
yeah. Initially, he decided to write Don Quixote because he was himself a fan, and he was bored of all these cliches.
In the previous episode, we said that it reminds us a lot of Flaubert, who created Emma just to separate this part of himself.
Yeah, displace it, yeah. But it's interesting that sometimes Don Quixote manages to make fun of other people's, right? Make them do what he wants them to do, right? Becomes kind of an author of a story inside the story.
Yeah.
He makes someone
Sancho.
No, Sancho is of course because we already discussed. It's because he's a bit. So I can't remember any other example.
I think it was when like Don Fernand and Cardenio swapped their girls, and like and Don Quixote was the reason of it, because he met Cardenio, took Cardenio with himself, and those people, they like.
Also, Cardenio, when he was having his schizo episode, reminded us a lot of Don Quixote. And he seemed quite agreeable with Don Quixote until they spoke of that one little disagreement of theirs.
It didn't happen like when he interrupted Cardenio,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of triggered him.
Mm-hmm. And after that, I made lots of points that with Don Quixote it works in the same way. Like, he seems completely normal and a kind soul, unless he's getting triggered by the chivalry notions of other peoples, and he goes berserk after that. We'll see that later in this 10 chapters too. Okay, let's go back to our chapter 45, and let's go back to Louis' case, where Don Fernand offers the judge and his servants to take him in and take him to his blood brother for him to work there. And there is a quote: "Otherwise it was easy to see from the determination of Don Louis that he would not return to his father at present, though they tore him to pieces. So he would rather die than leave Clara's side," which makes him, I think, a good match for Clara herself. And coming back to this, I think Don Quixote, very delusional man of a different reality, can easily be interchanged with realistic characters, because what's our reality depends on our perspective on the book. But these characters, they seem like they're portrayed as average chivalry books enjoyers. They seem plain. No? What's your opinion on Clara and Louis in general?
I already said that they seem plain.
I think they're like Romeo and Juliet.
Should I?
Was young and want to die.
Maybe it's because like we're reading it this time, but perhaps different audience would perceive it more
Different.
sincere, their relationship. So I can't be sure if they're like actually.
But I still think that the point Cervantes makes is that he's just trying to make fun of such characters. Because in contrast to them, Don Quixote internalized the chivalry fiction reality. It is his subjective reality. So he's quite serious about that. And even though it's somewhat painful to read, you can see his perspective. What do we make out of it? Here once again I make a note that Don Quixote's delusional knight would seem to resolve the issue. And in the end, what do we think? With the fact that chivalry sometimes helps him guide other people. I think I can ask this question both now and in the end. What do you think of Don Quixote, and do you really consider him a knight?
It's like an ambiguous question to answer, you know. Well, he manages to follow the knighthood laws and orders, but he also carelessly, like, how do you say? Like, he gives a vow to Cardenio, then he gives a vow to someone else, then he gives a vow to somebody else also, and he's not always like, how do you say it in English? Следует своему слову.
Keep his promises.
Yes, keep his promises. So in a way, I wouldn't call him a knight, but he depicts himself as one.
I understand that here some rules honor and he should follow them, and he tries somehow.
I think in one of the episodes we discussed the same
This-
question. Yeah, but in the example it was like that he didn't come from noble family, and he also knows that himself, but he still wants to believe that he's a real knight. So he kind of knows that he isn't a knight, truly a knight, but he just ignores it.
Was it necessary to be some nobleman to be a knight?
Knight
In
is a
that
title.
chapter, yeah, it was
Yeah, by law
something.
he can be considered a knight because he, by chivalry
I think it's
chivalry
born.
laws, because he wasn't knighted by king. He was knighted by an innkeeper. So by chivalry law he can be a knight, and everything he is doing is not considered chivalry.
But his grandfather was.
Yes, he is a noble man of a poor family, but it's not that he's a peasant like Sancho, right? So he has some kind of background in terms of his family.
And I think the point that is made a lot is that traveling knights, knight errants culture died out, but the knighthood still persists in society.
The question is, had it ever existed? Or was it only in the books, I mean, this knight errantry thing, right? So when he talks about it, for him, knight errantry is a history to which he wants to belong. You might not remember, but we discussed this problem of epic or romance time as totally separated from the time of reality. And of course we know that Madame Bovary, which is a realist novel, or even Mrs. Dalloway, at least we talked about how Mrs. Dalloway is during the First World War, so we believe we can actually map that novel onto the reality to which we also belong. But we cannot do that to those knights and heroes from the ancient epics, etc., etc., right? So they live in a different time. And so for Don Quixote, who wants to live in that epic time, for him, knight errantry is a history that he follows as a reality. But then this whole knighting by the king, right? Okay, we might say nobody does it anymore. That's why he has to ask the innkeeper to do that for him, right? Because he can't find any alternative to that. He just what's
I think
Who
you
is
can.
knights, so someone knights them.
yeah, well, okay, you can say yes that British king and
Yeah.
queen, who is his mother, right? They knighted a lot of people, such as Sir Leslie Stephen, Virginia Woolf's father.
He could actually go to the British army, get knighted, and
Yeah, and become
run away.
Don,
Yeah.
right? But he calls himself Don. And if you think about this whole rite, it's actually a performative act which is verbal. I now declare you man and wife. He said so, and from that moment, this is true. The same with knighting, right? If you think about wedding and knighting as two kind of similar operations, right? It's just words,
It's just hard to
but they are supposed to change reality.
But it's said by
Yeah,
priests.
yeah,
so
okay.
They
But
given
I
this.
know, but they are given that by agreement of people, which are also words. The legal titles and everything is just done by convention, right?
Mm.
So Don Quixote, basically, we can say that he questions that convention. If they can say so, why cannot I say so? He wants to become the subject. He wants to become an artist. He wants to be the author, like Cervantes. Cervantes can do anything to him, as you say, right? But Don Quixote wants to be also someone who can do whatever he wants with his life and with others. And that's quite an interesting aspect of him, right?
If he thought so, he wouldn't ask innkeeper to knight him. He firstly thought that it's not innkeeper and it's not an inn, it's a castle and a king.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, if he thought like that, he could knight himself. I declare myself a knight or something like that. But he
Yeah.
needed a knight.
Yeah,
He
and
imagined
that's an
that
example
he
of how
was
he makes other people behave the way he wants
Yeah.
to,
I
right?
just wanted to.
He
explain-
uses them and they become characters in his book, which he acts out.
Yeah, but it's not voluntary. he was he was punching everyone.
He
Forced him.
he's aggressive.
Also in chapter 45, he himself, when Sancho was fighting with that man, Don Quixote was proud of Sancho and said, like,
Yes.
one day I will make you a knight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there he
Oh.
talked about the fact that chivalric romances are so like realistically written that they must have been true. And he truly believes that they were true.
Well, the interesting thing, it's not in volume 1 though, right? But he will make Sancho governor. You know? Yeah. He promises, and he will.
And he himself will make his way into the history books later.
Yes, exactly, and we are reading him. So he achieves what he wants after all, you know? Yes, but also another aspect that I've been thinking about, talking about the question that you've posed. Of course, it's a very complicated one, and the answer should be ambiguous. I totally agree with Rizayel. But another function that he performs is that next to him, people change. Those romantic lovers. Remove Don Quixote from that situation, and we have a standard story about romantic lovers, chivalry, hundreds of Claras and whoever all around. Cervantes puts Don Quixote next to them, and now they are funny, right? And he is funny, and everything is more or less funny. You can't treat it seriously, and you are smiling while you are discussing all those little episodes, right? Chivalry is not supposed to be funny. This is what Cervantes does. This is why he is a novel and not another romance. It's not even just about humor. It's about contrast. So Don Quixote, wherever you put him here, right? Our situation changes completely. So he actually transforms the reality by his simple presence. It's very powerful, this guy. Funny guy.
He doesn't distort the reality.
I would personally answer this question with a simple yes, because he's a knight
He's a knight,
in many, many layers. He's definitely a knight in his own reality. Arguably, he can be called a knight, and everyone, even though jokingly, puts him into this position in real world, and even outside of the book reality. I put here a quote, didn't put an after of the quote. This is from a research about Don Quixote's value as a novel and him as a character. And here Don Quixote is described as a symbol of resistance against oppression, casting him as a timeless symbol of the fight for justice and autonomy.
This is a naive reading, but
Well,
yeah.
he made his way as a knight into many layers. Yeah.
Let's move.
Okay, let's go. Later, after that, I wanted to talk about the narration of the book, and so far, how many narrators have been openly introduced. Biningili is the second one,
Yeah.
The first one is the unnamed.
Unnamed.
Yeah.
and I think we can call the named narrator Cervantes himself. Mhm.
As well as the shepherd who saw the Cardenio in the hills, Cardenio, Dorothea,
Mhm.
Dulcinea also. Yeah, she also tells her perspective later in chapter.
And I wanted to argue about that, whether can we even call them narrators, fully credited narrators, and why. I to myself explained it in the same way. Just by the setting of the novel, we are said that Benengeli is a fictional on one of the layers of the novel. He's a historian who documented the true story. Therefore, he presumably went around, collected all the stories of Cardenia, Dorothea, and so on, which made them, by the system, narrators. And this is the only way it works, to me. What do you think? Did you see them as separate narrators? That's something different, no?
When they started to tell their stories, or for example, in my session when they read story of this man, I don't remember.
Spanish names.
Cardenio.
No,
Anselmo?
Story of Anselmo. I assume that okay, now we have another narrator, and now we have another story that interrupted the main narration of Don Quixote.
To me, all their little stories seem to slightly intervene with the main narration of Benengeli.
Yeah, you too.
It's all like they're been artificially put into the text. They don't seem like Benengeli all changed them to his narration, build them in.
It feels like Italo Calvino a little bit.
Calvino knows Cervantes very well.
And we also have the anonymous translator as a narrator we didn't mention. He was mentioned in the text. And in the last chapter, we see that the next narrator is introduced by current narrator. And what effect?
I just want to comment. When you described how Sid Hamid Benengeli walks around collecting those tales and putting them down in Arabic, do you really assume that this is necessary? That it is necessary for Benengeli to really have existed and written that? Because my idea is that you can actually consider the primary narrator who comes after Cervantes and is invented by Cervantes, right? Maybe he's a lying guy who invents Benengeli. And this is absolutely enough. But this doesn't mean Benengeli is not a narrator. The problem is that whether the narrator is someone who is speaking. Do you think it's Benengeli who is speaking? Started from chapter 9 of part 1.
No, of course it's Cervantes.
Well, yeah, it's still right. Or maybe it's the same narrator who pretends that he lost the book and blah blah blah. He's playing with us, right? And then if the speech is just by the same narrator, then Benengeli doesn't matter. But it depends on what you believe. As far as those digressions, those stories that different characters tell, right? Like even in the section that we read together, there was such a story about two lovers, and then they actually appeared. No, some of them was already dead. Yeah, but anyway, those are narrations because all of those really speak, and we can read their narratives. That is enough for them to be narrators. So the only narrator who is under question is probably Benengeli, because you can't guarantee that it's really him who is speaking, right? Those fictional characters are fictional narrators, it's fine. But does Benengeli ever speak unless we believe that first narrator, that he really found those manuscripts, which sounds like
The same question can be applied to Dorothea and other characters, to Benengeli, to translator, and to the even
no, but Don
unnamed
Quixote meets
narrator.
Dorothea. So she belongs to the same story world where Don Quixote is a character, right? And she narrates something to him, and he tells Sancho some stories, etc., etc. So all of them narrate from time to time.
But Benengeli is under question.
Yeah, to me,
He's the one not fitting.
he never appears apart from as his name on the manuscript. But does the manuscript exist? That's the question.
I think it also depends on
It's
the
a pseudo
translator.
translation after all, right? Like Persian letters. Persians didn't write them.
Can you say that the change of tone between unnamed narrator and Beybarys is enough to separate them?
Did you feel there was?
I felt that Beybarys seems funnier, intentionally.
So it feels like a translation from Arabic? Yeah. You should actually ask Arturo.
Fortunately, he doesn't speak English very well. But
Ask him in Spanish.
I will try.
Fortunately, we don't speak Spanish very well.
Okay.
We have the sign language when we're having his lessons.
Cool.
This midterm was
Cool.
And after that, I wanted to ask a relatively superficial question. What effect did this multiplicity of narrators have on you? And why was it introduced to begin with?
I think that it was made just to remind us that this is not real. Somehow.
And how did it make you feel? Did it work with you, this type of narration?
I think it was good, but there wasn't so much impact on the plot itself, on Don Quixote's actions. But like Don Quixote didn't interact with the reader, but those
He did.
he did.
He quite often addressed readers as
Yeah.
readers, comma, and something.
Okay, but those narrators are closer to us than Don Quixote is. Like he's in a little box, and they're in the bigger, and Cervantes, and then us.
I can't say. I can see how it made me feel. I felt like I almost was held personally accountable for all the stupidity that's happening in the book. Like, the multiplicity of narration doesn't let you get involved too much with the book. It constantly, it catches you, pulls you out, and you
that this is a book.
and you have to criticize yourself for believing all this bullshit
Yeah.
from time to time.
This is what I thought when you started your discussion, actually, because you seem to be talking about these characters as if those events really happened, as if you forgot that it was just a book about Don Quixote, which actually mocks the whole idea of readers who believe in books, like Don Quixote believes in books, that's why he's crazy. But we are talking about that book almost as if we are crazy like Don Quixote.
To me, it also seemed like that when I just started to read some stories, like these mini episodes of other characters. It seems like why is this episode even here? But then, because of this like switch of narrators and this constant metafictional theme, I start to critically assess how this little story relates to Don Quixote and the bigger narration.
I just went with the flow. Kinda.
Did you have a flow?
Yeah, because Alexandra didn't.
Yeah, I mean the multiplicity of the narrators at the same time, you stop caring about the factual knowledge that is happening throughout the book, and because of that you just read and kind of have fun during all the absurdity that happens.
I have an opposite opinion. After what I said, I formed a new line of thought that maybe all stories about Don Quixote himself and his personal adventures were written this unbearable on purpose. And then we get those little stories from the books the priest reads, or from the other characters like Dorothea and Cardenio, and they seem to written in a more bearable style, yet we're getting pulled out of them. And we said ourselves that we like reading them more sometimes.
Yes, like the last story told in the inn about the two friends and the wife.
Love table?
Yeah, we were discussing for most of the session.
Yeah. And a little note about Don Quixote going crazy with wine. Let's go back to the retelling of the general plot. Let's be quite quick about it. Brotherhood remembers the order to arrest Don Quixote. Priest makes his point and persuades them that Don Quixote is actually out of his mind and he should not be jailed. And let me rather pay you a small amount, and can you please convey him to his house? After that they agree, and we move to the, I think, concluding part of the 10 chapters when Don Quixote is being taken home. And what do you remember about that?
There's also like a funny scene with Sancho and Don Quixote.
Which one?
When what is the name of the cardenio Fernandez woman? Dorothea. When Sancho is accusing Dorothea of not being a real queen because she's Fernando, yeah. And she turns red and starts, oh, it's enchantment, he must be mad. I like that part.
Can we fit another question? What do you think of Sancho after all? Because we made prediction that me and Beybarys constantly disagreed, but you guys constantly said that he's just a delusional smart guy, slightly like Don Quixote. And we just said that he's a dum-dum.
He's naive.
You know, kind of like before, I had the feeling that maybe Sancho is also mad. But because of his realistic traits, like material gains, you kind of stop thinking that he's mad, but rather that he's really stupid. So that would be my
At
kind of
first,
thought.
I thought that he's just bored with his life. He has nothing like special during his ordinary life, so he like осознанно, how would I say it? Consciously decides to believe all these delusions of Don Quixote. But then I thought like maybe he's actually believing them.
Like an
So-
escapism? Or
Yeah. Like at first I thought that he realizes that these are all like stupid things, but then he became too into all of these events, and then I thought like he's really dumb.
I did prepare a quote about it, and we can continue with this later, about Sancho's general attitude about stuff happening to him. Or I can find it now if you want, if you have more things to say in the meantime. Should we move on?
there's always something happening to Sancho. The poor guy.
Yeah, poor guy. Remember the moment when he was blanket yeah, when Don Quixote left him.
And before Don Quixote is being taken home, how was he put in a cage?
When he was asleep, all those friends put him in the
Put masks on?
and put Don Quixote in деревянный wooden cage and said that it was all enchantment, like, and you must return to your how was his lover's name? Dulcinea.
And speaking of Sancho in that moment, it's written, of all that verse, Sancho was the only one who was at once in his senses and in his own proper character, and he, though he was within very little of sharing his master's infirmity, did not fail to perceive all these disguised figures were.
Maybe it's because Sancho wasn't a part of this guys. Like, you know what I'm trying to say?
But he's not their friend.
To me, Sancho is the simplest man of the entire novel, because his intentions are always clear. He believes whatever brings him some sort of benefit, or at least promises him some sort of benefit, and it's quite superficial in that sense.
I think that if we would not have Sancho, then we would believe everything that is happening. And Sancho is the one who's telling, no, this is not a real thing that's happening. Those people are not wizards. It's just real people. You are not enchanted. And if we would not have Sancho, everyone would just be mocking Don Quixote, and the reader will not know about truth.
Actually, until chapter 5, we don't have Sancho, right? Sancho only appears for the second
Second outing.
I'm trying to remember the word. There is a special word in the English translation which is old-fashioned, and that's why I don't remember. The first outing, as you say, yeah. The second one. Yeah. So we know what it's like without Sancho. So there is something for us to compare.
But at first I thought that Sancho is like going along Don Quixote just because of his benefit. But then it seems to me like he actually is there for some other sake, or without a sake, because it starts to get like it went too far, like to just be just for the island.
And he could leave many times also.
Actually,
Like, there
I
is
was thinking about it, and did he really, was he able to leave? He started having those questions when Don Quixote was in the mountain going all crazy, and he had a chance to go home and stay there. But when he was getting there, he got caught by the priest and the barber and had to.
he met Dorothea, who he thought was a prince. He could give him.
And that was later, and once again, he had no reason to return.
And now he like finds out that she's not a princess. He was like, let's just go home. I'm so sick of it.
Actually, even after he realizes that Dorothea is not a princess, he still grieves about a castle he could have gotten, and I don't get it to this very point. What was that about? Or
It's promised an island, no?
an island, a kingdom, or at least a small
He got
village?
upset because he would have black slaves.
Yeah.
He got upset, but then he
Yeah.
got happy because he said like, I can always sell them. That was very. Yeah, remembering that it was written in which century? Like at Cervantes' time, it was okay. So,
And in and moments later, after Don Quixote gets put in the cage, in the wooden cage, Barber appears and he gives a little speech promising something to Don Quixote. After which Don Quixote calms down and decides for a time being to stay in the cage and not fight it. What did Barber promise? Does anyone remember? He pretended to be a magician that cares for the sake of Don Quixote's knight. He's attendant magician, and the fact that Don Quixote is in the cage means that he's gonna be soon back with his Dulcinea, and he can live a happy life. And he promised him fantasy of marriage and future little lions who will carry the honor of Don Quixote and Sultan. And Don Quixote seemed pleased with that. It's almost like he was ready to quit with all his adventures. And with that, we move to the chapter 47. I wanted to spend most of the time discussing this chapter, but we found interesting topics even before this. And in chapter 47, on the road home, characters said goodbye to Lucinda, Dorothea, Zad, those four, the judge and the daughter and Louis, and we're left with the priest, the barber, Don Quixote, Sancho, and other escorts like brothers, officers of Brotherhood. And on the way to La Mancha, they meet the canon. And what do you remember about the how did the canons and priests dialogue go?
They agreed that chivalry novels can make people mad.
And before that,
Before
how
that,
did we get to the point?
he asked why Don Quixote is captured, what happened with him, why he's so mad. And then they told him the story of Don Quixote. Blah, blah,
First,
blah.
he asks, "Do you know what my errand is?"
Uh-huh.
I won't explain.
Oh, it was because
It would be very long.
It was because Don Quixote was in a cage, and these things don't usually happen in books. And he says, like, maybe chivalry changed, and now it's different, and like rules. I don't know all of the rules, and he asks those people, "Do you know what's happening now?"
Oh, here I have another quote by Sancho. where he's trying to persuade Don Quixote that he's not enchanted and that he knows all his friends who captured him. He says that you're not enchanted just because you still have your basic needs to cover, you still feel them, therefore you cannot be under some sort of spell. And there is a quote about his attitude. I am not with child by anyone, nor am I a man to let myself be got with child, if it was by the king himself. Though, meaning I am not to be fooled by this whole situation. Though I am poor and I am an old Christian, I owe nothing to nobody, and if I long for an island, other people long for wars. It's just supporting my mental argument that he mostly cares about his personal benefits because he lives in poor conditions. And moving back to the canon speech. I can read the entire part of it if you want, just to... Or I can highlight the main points that he made. Them a bit lower. Notes of the canon speech. First of all, the canon critiques, ironically, people who ignore the canon of antique comedies and who write about common people, who choose their main characters to be common people, not some sort of kings or true knights. He says that shame should be the actors that throw a shadow on Spain's honor. And the canon says that all written works should undergo some sort of governmental inspection and earn the right to be published, and critiques an inclusion of some sort of historical facts into this pure nonsense and pure fiction. And how can we interpret this speech before? Because I immediately had the thought that all this can be applied to Cervantes himself.
Yes.
Like all this sounds like him having a dialogue with his critics, with his audience. What do you think?
It felt like a cameo of Cervantes because he also, that man also said that he writes books himself, but he stopped because his book was too good.
I think he stopped because it was disrespecting his
Principles.
professional field. And priests are not supposed to write about knight errants. I have some other quotes by the canon. He also makes a note that if they redirect all their skills, these authors might guide themselves and become as famous in prose as the two princesses of Greek and Latin poetry are in verse. So they could be as successful writing in the canon. And the canon admits he once started writing children's books that we already discussed. Here I made a little note about the narration. We have the canon retells a dialogue he had with some opposer of his point of view, and suddenly it sounds like this. No doubt, replied the actor in question, you mean the Isabella, the Phyllis, and the Alexandra? Those are the ones I mean, said I, and see if they did not observe the principles of art, and it by observing them, on and on and on. What interested me is the pronoun I used in the sentence. It's like he's introduced like a new narrator / the audience. Like he's fully built into the book. And with this we can move to chapter 49 that goes on with the canons and the priest's dialogue. And in the meantime, Sancho.
Yeah, what was the canon's? Do we get the clear understanding of canon's attitude towards chivalry books? Because at first he tells Don Quixote that he knows about it more than anyone, but then he kind of the whole notion of chivalry, like because they're absurd and.
He tried to write a chivalry book himself in such a way that he could avoid all those mistakes other writers make. And I think he did not succeed.
Because probably the canon that he defends as a canon is older than the chivalry books. The chivalry books are medieval, and he is for the classical antiquity kind of purity and logical kind of thing, right? And for the ancient Aristotelian canon, books of chivalry suck, of course.
Because conservative?
Yeah, kind of classicist, yeah.
Also, it was funny that Canon gave some book recommendations to Don Quixote, and like the books that you like are stupid, and you rather should read history books or the Bible.
Yeah, as we were already speaking of, by that time, Sancho persuaded all the escorts to let Don Quixote out to relieve his needs. And after that, Don Quixote picks out on some parts of the dialogue and decided to intervene. And what's his point of the argument with the canon?
Canon says that chivalry books have no value and they don't teach anything, but just made to to entertain people, while clever people should read books that will teach them something, and those real books should be
Useful.
yes, useful, and to enrich their inner soul or something.
It is not the first notion of books being useful in the sense of getting knowledge out of them. Because before we heard the priest in the inn talking about the unnecessity of chivalry books because they're useless. Yeah, so we kind of can see the tendency from the priest to the canon. And I wonder why Cervantes add that to the plot.
Here, Don Quixote says something I want to quote. As I said before, read these books and you will see how they will banish any melancholy, and you may feel and raise your spirits should they be depressed. For myself, I can say that since I have been a knight errant, I have become valiant, polite, generous, well-bred, magnanimous, courteous, dauntless, gentle, patient, and have learned to bear hardships, imprisonments, and enchantments.
He is the example of himself.
And humble.
And just as Don Quixote defending himself as an actor here, he basically says it doesn't have to be that serious. It can be just for your personal relaxation, for your personal needs. It doesn't have to be of canon or antique to be read by common people and by anyone else. And just as he defends himself as an actor, Cervantes, through this passage, it's almost like he defends himself for writing whatever he wrote.
Don't you think by this speech Don Quixote showed his sane nature?
Yes.
Yeah, like
Yes.
he understands the nature of his
Yes. The
madness.
literary nature. Yes.
In that fragment, he manages to retell his all adventures as they were in reality, in the absurd way, not as he sees them himself, and then claims the canon to be enchanted, not himself. So, as I said before, the reality is what we established to be reality. And in World of Don Quixote, the canon does indeed appear crazy and enchanted, as we all walking around like as knights. This canon appears. Same he does to the condemned lead. And by this argument, everyone in Don Quixote novel can be found crazy, once for living in reality and once for living in fiction. Their main mistake is taking their subjective reality for an objective one and blindly believing the narrator. What do you think of it?
Yeah, and sometimes the narrator is Don Quixote himself, like in his self-defense speech. And actually, this is not the first time he is functioning as an author. In the first few chapters that we discussed in class, but I didn't have the time to draw your attention to that, but maybe you discussed it in the club. There is a moment in which Don Quixote starts writing a novel about himself. he imagines, oh, and there will be a sage in the future who will write about my adventures, right? Before they even start. And he actually begins to cite this novel. So he can create that reality not only with his actions, not only as an actor or a dramatist, but also as a writer, because his head is full of words which he either realizes as actions or keeps them in this word form. So he's really very fluid, he's unstable in a sense, right? That's why it's difficult to say for sure that he is aware of the fact that he is kind of not adequate or not. Sometimes he looks sane, sometimes he doesn't, right? Yeah. But the answer is that he is a writer in the debate. As if, sometimes the accused can defend themselves in court without a defense. Like I will defend myself. This is what Don Quixote does.
It's also a good side of Don Quixote that even if that canon insulted him, offended, like why do you read the stupid books? They are not anything more than just amusement, and he didn't get offended and fight him. He tried to explain because many people at that moment could fight him, or if he was that mad, he could also fight him.
Yes, but that's because words are also his weapon.
Yeah.
Like sword, word, S-W-O-R-D in English. Yeah.
It's actually interesting. How many characters have Don Quixote met so far whom he didn't try to fight? And the only far so far.
Yeah, previously he
And the only one so far whom he doesn't
then
fight.
he decided to
It's also a fight.
It's
It's a rhetorical fight.
You can see the character development, because he also shows up to fight with the... And he brought up the things and tried to make peace with the fights near the end.
But also maybe it's not character development, he is just fluid, as the professor said.
Or maybe he's out of his potion and he realized that if I fight, I might not recover. So instead I will use my words. I don't know what happened. I just remember that they all...
It's interesting that this time he acknowledges that he just perceives life more easily, and that these chivalry books are useful because you can just entertain yourself, and that is an advantage also. But before he argues that chivalry is more important than science, than scholars, scholars.
These last 4 chapters, I started having a strong feeling. We talked a lot before about us not knowing how Cervantes could possibly end the Don Quixote's adventures on some logical point, because we already know that at the end of the second volume he dies. But what's supposed to happen at the end of the volume 1? And with these last 4 chapters, it feels like Cervantes himself is giving answers on questions we asked ourselves a lot. Like with chapter 50 and the canon speech, he openly replies to his audience, and he leaves his personal comments on the multiplicity of narration, as we already discussed. And here, in chapter 51, the shepherd appears, who started sharing his personal story. And this story, to me, also felt like a response to the questions we asked a lot. Can we now talk about the story?
Yeah, it's about the girl named Leandra. So she was beautiful again. All people in the city loved her, wanted to propose her, and there were 2 noble guys. So she needed to choose between one of the guys, but at the same time here comes a man.
Vincent de la Roca.
Yeah, but she falls in love with him instead of those guys and runs with him and ends up in a bad situation.
And here we can see yet another story about marriage in different social classes, because recently Rocco is the son of some poor peasant from the same village. And why did she reject Evgenia and Anselma in favor of Vicente and Rocca?
Because he was romantic, I think. He made poems for her, and those two men was a choice of her father, and this man she chose herself.
Свой Cervantes ran out of the names against Anselmo.
I thought, is it him?
Maybe it's him.
And we spoke before about the age difference, age gap that Dorothea was fascinated by, and here we have Leandra, who I think is not yet 16 also.
She turned 16 and men from all countries.
She just turned 16. And Vicent who's 24. And we don't even get Eugenia's and Anselma's age, which I think can be higher from the context. I feel like.
I thought that the story is a combination of all stories that was before, because here we have a 16-year-old girl, shepherds, then they run away like Marcella, and those two men is like Anselma, like he, from the last story, kinda, and two men, beautiful girl.
Basically, they agreed to marry each other and flee town together. After that, she was found robbed in some cave, yet not defamed, as she assured herself. And after that, her father sent her to a monastery. And in her absence, all men who, in the meantime, fall in love with Leandra decide to, out of grief, leave for the mountains, settle there, where they started singing her praise, condemn her, and, as it said, in short, all abuse her and all adore her. This, I think, can be applied to all female characters of the novel in general. At the same time, they're abused and adored. And some blamed it on Leandra being so young, some on her being a woman. Same two reasons all previous female characters critiqued.
Sexism and hatred.
And men who were in love with Leandra went to the mountains, already said that. And intersections I found with previous stories are as follows. The story resonates a lot with the story of Marcella, where every man rushed to blame her for the man's death. Same is happening here. Escape to mountains. Who did escape to mountains before?
Yes.
This part. Immediately went to Dorothea and Cardenio. Dorothea and Cardenio also end up in the mountains for the same reasons of...
Don Quixote ended up because he freed the slaves.
I think Don Quixote, just like Dorothea and Cardenio, ended up in the mountains because of his tragic love that he created in his mind.
Yes.
Not because he freed the prisoners.
No, he initially didn't want to go. It's just Sancho who said, like, it's better if we go to the mountains. I think the Holy Brothers might came after us, that's why we need
Sancho
to
pushed
hide
him in
them.
the mountains, and then Don Quixote provided himself with foundations for being here.
Yeah, at first he was like strongly against going to the mountains because he wasn't ready to assume that he could be afraid of the Holy Brotherhood. And only after he reassured Sancho that he's not afraid, okay, we'll go there.
Yeah, I'm not going because of
In general, the dynamic of father and daughter relationship, did it remind you of anything? Leandra and her father are this rich family who lost their mother of the household. They have a young daughter whom the father is getting prepared to marry off.
Means like
To me, it immediately sounded like the Algerian woman's story.
Also, Carla's story. Carla and her. Carla is singing boy's lover.
Clara?
Clara.
And here, Vicente de la Roca, to get to Leandra, he lies about his accomplishments in war, and he's been quite chivalric about it, which reminds me personally about Don Quixote's approach. But there are only differences. Vicente de la Roca uses it as a tool to get the people, and Don Quixote also uses it, but doesn't even realize it. And after that, just a fantastic quote I could not skip by the shepherd. I follow another easier and to my mind wiser course, and that is to rail at the frivolity of women, at their inconsistency, their double dealing, their broken promises, their unkept pledges, and in short, the want of reflection they show in fixing their affections and inclinations. And we proceed with chapter 52. The last chapter of the first volume, where Don Quixote intervenes, and what does he say to the shepherd?
He orders them to set the lady free.
Yeah, he says basically that if I had a chance to participate in this fantastic adventure, I would definitely go to the monastery, set the girl free, give her into your hands, and do whatever you like. After that, shepherd realizes that something is probably not quite right with Don Quixote. He makes a comment about it out loud and regrets it immediately. How?
Yeah.
What happens next? Well, obviously, what happens next in Don Quixote?
Fight.
Yes. Don Quixote starts a fight, entertaining all the escorts, all the entire brotherhood. And after that, the ring, we hear the ring near the church.
The ceremony.
Don Quixote forces the shepherd to stop beating him and deal with it later. Jumps on the back of his horse and runs to the event. And what's happening there? In the real world? And in Don Quixote's delivery.
Start.
Yes.
Well,
He
of
got
course he did.
injured when the fight starts, and there was some statue of whom?
Of a
Of
girl.
woman, and he saw that she's captured, and he wanted to release her.
He wanted to release her, but then realizes that this is a stone.
There was some ceremony, church ceremony, I think, and
There was an icon of Saint Mary
yeah,
that they held on their shoulders during the ceremony, and this icon seemed like Miss damsel in distress to Don Quixote, as always, and he came to her rescue.
yes.
And what he did is he attacked the first one who responded to him, who paid attention to him, got his entire shoulder bone crushed, dropped off of his horse, and after that, Sancho and other escorts rush to him. Sancho believes that he's dead, and he gives a little speech. And I want to give a quote, and then we'll talk a bit more about Sancho as a character. O flower of chivalry, that with one blow of a stick has ended the course of thy well-spent life, O pride of the race, honor and glory of all La Mancha, nigh of all the world, that for want of free will be full of evildoers, no longer in fear of punishment for misdeeds. Although generous of all the Alexanders, since for only 8 months of service thou hast given me the best island to see girds or surrounds, humble with the proud, with the humble, encounter of dangers, endurer of outrages, and in name without reason, imitator of the good, scourge of the wicked, enemy of the wind, in short, king errant, which is all that can be said. And I think it would be the perfect end of the first volume, but after that there goes a small fragment about them coming back to Mancha finally, and how do their families meet Don Quixote and Sancho.
Sancho's wife asks if he
Yeah.
had kingdom. He says like no, but we will, or something like that.
And with Don Quixote?
Don Quixote's maid curses his books.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like, the whole outcome of him reading them.
Don Quixote's family is very concerned because they're already anticipating his third leave. The second he gets better, just like the readers themselves.
Now that you mentioned the books, are there books in the house when he
Some
returns?
of them were
There
burned,
was some books.
but some of them were left.
So
Not
not all.
And the barbers.
Yeah, I remember that they burned most of his library, but they kept some.
There was
They just had a long discussion on that.
I remember from the first
Yeah.
episode how Aliya described that
Yeah.
he saved one book because the author was Cervantes and he's supposed to write the second volume and they were like, no, let's keep it.
And actually, we can find out exactly the titles of the books that the priest decided to keep because he announces them in his dialogue with the canon. And there is a short description of each book that they skipped. And then we're introduced with the following narrator that we will see only in the second volume, and that's how the first volume finishes. So in the end, what do you make out of it? What's your final thoughts? What do you think of Don Quixote, of Sancho, your impression of the book, the role it played, any mental notes?
I liked how he came back home, like not in a cage, but with a injury, like a knife, coming back to recover. It kind of fits into his character, and I like that Cervantes chose for him to come not in a cage. Yeah.
I'm a bit upset that he didn't become a real knight. It was somehow.
Also, nothing really changed because it started with his expedition, and he came back, he went, he came back, and he will again go to another.
When I was just reading, like in the 20th chapters, it seemed to me like the book should end. But now, having finished reading the part 1, it seems like there were not too many adventures.
Yeah, the first 20 chapters were really cyclical, but then there was like new narration, and it was more interesting to read it. And I really, in 20 chapters, hope that Sancho would somehow influence Don Quixote and they would like come back home together, but none of this happens actually. And I feel like Sancho is getting more and more like silly. Yeah, passive, and like he's also losing his mind.
Yeah, because in the beginning he was trying to tell Don Quixote. Those are not trying.
Your perception of Sancho changes. As you said before, we were also thinking that okay, Sancho knows what is reality and what is not, and then by the end we just say that he is just hump. That's all.
Well, the interesting thing is that this could be interpreted as wisdom. Because do we know what reality is after all? You know, we live in the land of illusions, just like Don Quixote in many ways. One of the philosophical subtexts of this book is definitely that we can laugh at him, but there are so many situations in which we are now different. Like when you talked about some episodes I can't remember now, but I thought about those people who are founders of religious sects. You know, like the guy tells you that he is like the son of God or something, and then millions of people follow him and give them all their money and everything, as if they are enchanted by him, right? And he's just this guy, and there are cases in history, not very recent, when they end up burning themselves, and the guy kind of flees, because of course he was the deceiver in the first place. And Don Quixote is not like that, right? In that way, he is true. Of course, we don't know how stable he is and how much he realizes things about his own mental state. For that, you should probably just look at the last chapter of Volume 2, right? But generally, he's not a bad guy who deceives others in order to gain power. He's not enjoying power, although he beats them, etc., etc. But it's just like a child. He's playing, right? He's like a writer, like a child, like an artist, right? He's constructing reality around him, but not with bad intentions, and that's very important. So actually, Sancho, the change that you've noticed probably is, yes, he is influenced by Don Quixote, but not towards understanding reality to not understanding reality. I think it's towards a more complex understanding of reality. Because reality contains all kinds of crazy things, after all.
So he accepted Don Quixote's reality.
And you too. But Alexandra.
I just wanted to highlight that, like, upon the finishing first book, we are left with more questions and answers.
Yes.
And that way we kind of can get the sense of why people wanted for the second book to come out. Because you still want more, and you want to see developing of the characters throughout their story.
Because you know that, circular? Cyclical, not trope.
Also, what
Plot.
interests me.
Plot, yes. Plot is cyclical, and that's why we are waiting to Don Quixote release his comedy.
What kind of fanfics did people write after the first volume that Cervantes felt enraged and decided to publish the second volume?
So, yeah.
Was Don Quixote made an official knight in those, and Cervantes decided to...
It's actually a cool question.
I don't think that books are
Available for
Yes.
read?
Well, but there is research on that. Of course, nobody would be translating them, right? That's why they're unavailable. But I'm sure that Spanish, like scholars, have studied that, and we can read secondary sources on that.
So we can say in a way Don Quixote became a cult himself,
Yes.
a misunderstood cult.
I wonder how Cervantes knew about those fanfics, because they didn't have internet, and it was like I
Mail
think,
to him.
but it was I think it was pricey to print those books just for fun, just like
Yeah,
No,
but
we
that was
already said
already a
that.
commercial situation in the 17th century. Yeah.
Like it was hype at that time, and some people thought like they could get benefit from
Like
it.
some practical people.
So there was a big problem with after rights, авторские права.
Copyright. Yeah.
Yeah, copyright. So he had no choice but to respond to all these fanfics with his own continuation.
With the
of
real
book.
thing.
Yeah.
Forgetting that it was supposed to be Ben and Gilly, right?
Yeah.
Actually, it's not
So
like
quite-
Benigili at that point.
Quite a lot of contradictions there in this whole Ben and Gilly thing.
Wasn't he like, I found that missing part?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
here is the
Yeah,
official.
anybody could do that, right? After all. So authorship is a really interesting concept there. But Cervantes was somebody for whom his authorship turned out to be quite important.
I think that was his mistake. Firstly, it was like a genius something move to start your book. Like it's not me writing. It's the narrator is another man. But yeah, maybe he didn't thought like someone would use that against him. So yeah, as you said, someone might just, I have a continuation, so I'm writing it, not Cervantes right now. So,
You think we can, with this, we can finish? Does anyone else have anything to say to that?
I just keep thinking about Dostoevsky, who said that Don Quixote is the only positive character, and when he just knew another one in Dickens, Mr. Pickwick, and both of them are mad, and then Dostoevsky wrote the novel The Idiot, right, about another positive character, because basically he thought that a positive character who wouldn't be mad is impossible. But the interesting thing is whether you actually, after you read the first volume, would agree that Don Quixote is a positive character. Right? So So for Dostoevsky, that was like, yeah,
Is it actually
If
considered an
the
archetype?
good man, right? Good. I don't know. Yes.
So, like the figure of Don Quixote can be considered as an archetype, certain archetype. Like,
Yes.
are there any instances of this figure in the novels the rest of work throughout the course, or there's only Don Quixote?
Well, in our course, it's Madame Bovary.
Is she? She's the archetype of Don Quixote?
She belongs to the same archetype in some way, based on this bookishness and getting.
Idealism, realism,
Yes.
discourse.
So, how was your experience throughout gathering each week?
That was fun. And I want to thank you for giving us such an opportunity that we get to know each other more closely, like we met and we really had fun together.
It was so unexpected, to be honest. The book seems so big and so long.
It doesn't feel that way after all.
But after part 1, it feels like it was too short.
Yeah. Thank you.
Actually, I think we avoided a big mistake by inviting Professor Delazari to
To the
the
last.
concluding
Yeah,
episode.
actually, I thought I told you that it would have made more sense for me to appear early.
We wanted to invite you as soon as possible just to prove to you
That
that we
you
are
were
working
there.
on something, that there is some process going
But
on.
you have the videos, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this time, like, we are usually more active. It's just this time we feel like we said like everything.
No, I didn't feel that way. Actually, it felt very,
It was
very
hard
lively.
to add comments this time because every time I wanted to say something, I remember that we already said it.
Yes, I have you fight full on.
Yeah, there was 500 Beybarys like throughout the whole session. Like it was
Okay.
the first time when he wanted to say
Yeah.
something.
I watched the videos. I thought it doesn't cut everything off. Like, oh, fine, sorry. Okay. Yeah, okay, thank you so much. Very impressed. I'm very impressed and very happy for you and for myself for giving you such a clever
Thank you for coming.
Okay,
Bye.
thanks.